Hey everyone, it's Alison Heikkila. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we're going to make a Christmas card in non-traditional colors. So you can see I have Seedless Preserves, Uncharted Mariner, and Speckled Egg Distress inks. Those are going to be the colors that we're using. And I have the beautiful new Seasoned Sparkles embossing folder. Look at that. This is a 3D embossing folder from Spellbinders, and it's got snowflakes and starbursts and fabulous ornaments, and it's going to be really pretty. So we're going to open this up. And when you open up an embossing folder, you've got a side that has the raised design and then a side that has a flat piece. Like the whole thing is flat, pretty much. I mean, you've got the indentations, of course, but you can see that this one is clearly the raised and this one is definitely the flat side. So we're going to be applying our ink to the flat side because we're going to use these colors for our background, and the ornaments are going to be pushed up and they will be all white. So I'm going to start with some Seedless Preserves. And you know what I'm going to do, actually? I have a piece of 4 by 5 1/4 inch cardstock, and I'm going to lay this underneath here just to get kind of a rough idea, because I don't want to just ink the top with the Seedless Preserves and then the middle with the Uncharted Mariner and then the Speckled Egg all the way at the bottom, because we're really not going to have much of those outer two colors if we do it that way. So by putting the cardstock here behind it, we can kind of see where we're going and make sure that we have enough of each of the 3 colors. And you want to rub gently. You can do this with whatever like dye ink you want, but I do find it does work a bit better with a felt pad as opposed to a foam pad, because these are more compressed. They're not as squishy, and you don't have to worry about quite so much ink oozage happening. You know what? I'm going to go in with the Speckled Egg next because this is my lighter color and I don't want to accidentally get a lot of Uncharted Mariner in my Speckled Egg. And you can see I'm going across the whole thing, and obviously we don't need that much ink, but I do want to make sure that, you know, even if I don't put my cardstock exactly where the center is, I'll still have color. So now I'm going to go in with Uncharted Mariner, and I'm just going to go over it like that. That is looking good. Okay, so now I'm going to move this for a second, and I've got my white cardstock, and I'm going to just spritz it with some water on the back side. And I spritz it on the back because I don't really want the ink to start bleeding where it's wet. So now I'm going to lay this down. You can see I have all 3 colors there. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to bring it to my die cut machine, and we're going to run it through. All right, let's see what we have. My paper was a little crooked, but I think it's fine. Look at that. Look how pretty that is. Super fast way to get a cool background. So now I want to highlight those ornaments a bit. So how are we going to do that? We're going to take another color of Distress ink, and we're going to just lightly touch the top of it. Again, it's really good to use a felt pad for this because it's not so squishy. The fact that it's firm helps you kind of gently touch those high areas and not kind of soak into the low ones. By the way, this you can just spritz with water or run it under a sink and it'll be totally clean. I think I want to go with Evergreen Bough for this. It happens to be one of the mini distress inks that I have, but the size doesn't really matter in this case. If you wanted to use a full size, that's fine, but I just happen to have this color in a mini. I do eventually want to get all of my distress inks in full size. Okay, so I'm going to very carefully just rub very, very lightly across the top. Now, it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay because the background is kind of mottled and, you know, clearly it's imperfect, but in a good way, right? So don't worry about getting some on the lower regions. Don't worry about it. It's going to look fabulous when we're done. And if you don't want to do this, you can certainly skip this step. You do not have to add this ink because some people might be like, you know what, that's a little too messy for me. And that's okay. You don't have to do this. But I think that looks pretty cool. I wish there was a little bit less ink on these, but it's all good. I like it. I think that that's nice so far. I'm going to just clean up my desk here. Now I have this Merry Sentiment set. This is also from Spellbinders. This is from a new Lisa Horton collection. You've seen me use the Bow and Bell scallop frame that's from this collection a lot lately. It's fantastic. So there's this, and then there's also one that has Christmas as the focal image. But we're going to use the Merry today. And I've already used this set a couple of times, so I have a bunch of these pre-cut. You can see you stamp all of the sub-sentiments at once, and then you die cut them all at once, which is a super huge time saver. And then you can just store them. I keep them with my stamp and die set, but you can also put them into a binder like I often do with some other sentiments. Just in this case, it was a little easier for me since I'm working with this set so much to keep it with the set itself. So now I'm going to try my best to get this out of here. It's sticking. The tape that is holding the dies in place is sticking to the packaging. Okay, there we go. So I've got my Merry, I've got my shadow, and my other shadow. So you can see that there's 3 layers to this. You don't have to use all 3, but I gotta say, it does look really nice. So I want to coordinate my sentiment with my background. So how are we gonna do that? We're gonna take our white cardstock here. This has a little bit of schmutz on here, so I don't want to use that part. And I'm going to start with the speckled egg. And I'm going to just apply this ink. If you have the spray stain, you could use that too, but I have the ink out, so it's just easier to go with this. Just apply it to the cardstock. Now we have coordinated cardstock to go with our card design. And I'm going to use the middle layer for this. And I think that I'd like to go with the kind of the way they have it here. Actually, I shouldn't use the middle layer. Maybe I'll use the, let me think. No, you know what? I'm going to go with white for the top layer. And then we'll use this speckled egg, and then we'll go darker with the bottom layer. That's what we're going to do. Sometimes it just takes a moment to work it all out, you know? Is that going to fit there? No. Let's do this. Cut this out. And now for our back layer, I think we're going to go with the Uncharted Mariner. And yes, you use a good amount of ink for this, but to have something that's fully coordinated is so worth it, in my opinion. Okay. Need a little bit more right here. All right. There we go. I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to run all of these through my die cut machine, and we will put together our sentiment. All right, this is all cut out, and let's take a look at what it's going to look like when it is all stacked up. I love the font for the main layer. Oh, that's so pretty. We could even hide this if we want to, which I kind of do because it's a little too heavy. Oh, I love that. That's so nice. Now let's see if we have any sentiments in this little baggie that are going to work with it. I went through the baggie, and again, there's 2 different sets in here, so there's a lot of sentiments, but I think I'm going to go with the Merry Greetings. It was stamped with Twilight VersaFine Clair ink, which is my second favorite color ink to stamp with, the first being Nocturne, which is the richest black ever, but this Twilight ink goes so well with the Uncharted Mariner, so we're going to go with that. So I'm going to put all of these extra sentiments away, glue this together, and then we'll finish up our card. By the way, I realized that the Greetings is not actually in the Merry set. So let me show you the Christmas set. This is Christmas Sentiments. Again, it's a Lisa Horton set from Spellbinders. And you've got Christmas with all of these other sentiments. And it's done the same way as the Merry with a single stamp and then a die that cuts out all of those sentiments at once. So I just wanted you to see that the Greetings is actually in this set. It's great couple of sets to have in your stash if you like to make Christmas cards. Okay, I've got this all glued and I love how it looks. I'm really glad that I went with the white layer on the top because it sort of mimics the way the embossing folder came out with that big amount of white. That doesn't make much sense, but you know what I'm saying. And then we're going to go in with our Evergreen Bough and ink up our card base. I don't really want to use the Seedless Preserves for that because it's such a dominant color on the background itself already. So I don't want to use it too much. Make sure that's straight. Okay. Put this on top, and now we have our base. And we're going to just ink that up roughly. Doesn't need to be perfect unless you want it to be. I kind of like that scratchy look. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, see, I like how some of that white is showing still. That's cool. Okay. Let's add some glue to the background. You could use foam tape if you want to, but I think that in this case, using just some wet glue is fine. If you use dry glue, like a glue runner or whatever, that's okay too. All right, get that on there. Let's get it sort of straight, maybe. There we go. That's pretty good. And there you have it. A non-traditional colored Christmas card done with a really cool embossing folder and a really lovely die set. I like it. I think these colors are great. Really pretty. So I hope you learned a thing or two today. I hope that you'll come back and see what else I've got cooking in my studio space. I will be back very soon with another card. Be sure to head over to my blog to see what other projects I have that don't have videos to coordinate with them. Yeah, I'll be back real soon with another video. Thanks so much for hanging out. Be well, stay safe. Peace out.